Welcome back. It's Clef from Punchboard Paradise, and today is the day that we do the top 10 all-time favorite board games from me. Hey, if you haven't seen any of the other videos, feel free to go back and watch them. I've started at number 101, and I've worked my way all the way down here to the top 10. So excited to share this with you guys. I hope that you like some of these games. These are the games that every time somebody says, hey, do you want to play one of these games? I'm like, yes, let's get it to the table. Let's play it. I love these games. So without further ado, let's get going. And my number 10, probably going to be the most like, I didn't expect that to be in your top 10. And to be honest with you, it is kind of a different type of game than what I typically nowadays would go for. But I still think the strategy in this game is so good, it has to make my top 10. And that is Heaven and Ale. Yep, Heaven and Ale by good old Michael Kiesling and Andreas Schmidt. I remember when I first played this game, I was like, I'm not sure. But then repeated plays really brought out what I really love about this game. And that's that really interactive part of the game where as you're moving forward to grab things on the track, you can go as far as you want to grab what you need, but then obviously you leave everything else behind. But there's that moment where you're like, oh my God, I need that particular piece, or I need that scoring disc, or I want that monk. And your opponent is ready to move. And you're like, please don't go take that. Please don't go take that. And then the joy of them not taking it, or the agony and the defeat of, they took the piece I needed. I love that. Yes, once you get to your board, it's just a puzzle there. There's nothing that anybody is doing anything to interact with there. But to me, the board is so interactive of when you take a piece and what you're doing, and your opponent can kind of, in fact, I really honestly, 2-player is probably my favorite player count for this, because I just like that back and forthness, and it's quick. 3 rounds. I mean, I can knock out a game with somebody who really knows what they're doing in a half an hour with this game. I just love it. It will be a mainstay for me for always. In fact, funny thing is I think I've probably played this like 3 to 4 times already this year. So, I mean, we're not even through January yet, but it's just one of those games that I will always play. I love it very much. If you've never checked this one out and you like Euro games that have some interaction, but then also kind of have a really good puzzle, this is definitely one to try. And that is my number 10, Heaven and Ale. So now my number 9 is a little bit more on some of the games that maybe you've seen in the past here from my top 101. And this is going to be my final entry for my Splotters. Now, if you didn't watch all the 101 and you're like, I wonder where his Splotters rank, I do have a video that shows my rankings of the Splotters. And as I said in that ranking, I feel like this one day could change. But for right now, my top Splotter game is still going to be Food Chain Magnate. Oh boy. Whoa, talk about crunchy, interactive. What can I do to undercut my opponent so that I can sell the food? So good. And the ketchup expansion has just made this game shoot to the top. I mean, I used to enjoy this game just as the base game, but when the ketchup came out, the ketchup mechanism came out, the ketchup expansion came out, what a phenomenal way that they integrated all these cool extra things. And I've even done it where I've literally added every single thing from the ketchup expansion in. I wouldn't suggest that. That gets a little crazy, but it's so much fun to kind of mix and match. Obviously, you got the new milestones, but then you've got, like fry chefs, and you've got different ways to advertise, and then you've got new like night shift managers. There's so many cool things that the game adds with that expansion. I'll be honest with you, probably wouldn't be my number 9 of all time without that expansion. So sometimes I feel like expansions come and go. One thing I didn't mention, Heaven and Ale with that expansion, it has an expansion. If you've never played with that, don't bother. It's not very good. The game is so good just by itself. Not to say that Food Chain's not all good by itself, but Food Chain, I think, rose to a new level with that expansion, especially because it's just modules. And you could add in really small things. You can add in the bigger things. Just phenomenal. Great interactive. Don't play this game if you don't like people screwing with you and all of a sudden you think, oh, I'm going to deliver all this food right here. Oh, wait, I'm not. It's so much fun for me. If that's not your cup of tea, don't try this one. But I absolutely love it. My favorite splatter of all time. Coming in on my number 9 of all time of all my top board games is Food Chain Magnate. So my number 8 is another one of those that if you know me at all or have ever listened to any of my podcasts, this is one of those games that I have always said is at the top of my list of all time. And this game is actually, I think that out of all my top 10 right now, since I've started doing top 10s like 5 years ago, I think there's only 2 games in my top 10 that have been there throughout time. And this is one of them. And this is the amazing Nations. I can't even begin to tell you what makes this game so good for me. I don't really think of this as a civilization game. Like I've played civilization games where you're out exploring and then you're, trying to do different things to make your civilization, grow and do this. I don't get that feeling with Nations, which is fine with me. I don't need it to be a civilization game. I just find this to be a very much of a, how do I maximize what I have of trying to, what cards am I going to get to maximize to eventually get the most points at the end of the game? And I love it. I love the interactiveness in this of you've got not only the cards that you're going for, but you have a stability track, you have a military track, you have what's called the books track, kind of the learning track. You have these different tracks that you are competing with other players to either have these events that will either go good for you or go bad for you, and obviously different other things that they do to get colonies or you've got wonders that you can build. There's just so many awesome parts about this game, but really for me, it's that interactivity with the with the other players. And I mean, I like this game at 2, and I like it at 5, but I think it's best at 3 and 4. So 2 is can kind of, I don't mind it at 2, but I mean, I prefer, like I said, 3 or 4. 5 gets a little too chaotic, and they have like this where you double up on the good and the bad on the events, which I don't know, just never really worked much for me. So I'm just letting you know, 3 and 4, those are my favorite player counts. I do know the cards quite well. I mean, I've got a group of friends that we can talk in code of, that guy got the Sphinx, or, oh, boy, better be first in military so you have an opportunity to get boxers in round 4, because there are just so many points. There's so much good with that. And I realize sometimes when people are like, oh, let's, you want to teach me Nations. And then it's like, oh, wow, there's so much that comparatively. But it does have a little bit of like I just taught a couple of new people the other day. And like you can be like, put it yourself at like a lower level than them. So then that way they're getting some more resources than you are to kind of help balance it out, which it did. Like I said, I taught a couple of new people the other day, and one of the new people, Tim, he ended up winning the game. So partly because he got Sphinx and Boxers, a couple of the best cards in the game. But anyways, enough to talk about this. If you like, civilization type of games that have that feel and really like a lot of interactivity, I would say check it out. Once again, this also comes with an expansion, and this one also is called Nations Dynasty. I feel like it's a must. It adds these turmoil cards, and it also gives you a couple of other powers for each one of your nations, plus adds a whole bunch of other countries into it. I bought 2 copies of the Dynasty expansion when it came out, because that way I could play with either side of a board, because it would have, like, say, Korea on one side and like, one of the other countries on the, like India on the other side or something like that. And I was like, well, what if I want to play with Korea and India at the same time? So I bought 2 of them. I know I've heard this is coming out in a big box where it's going to include dynasties in it. Hopefully they don't put them double-sided so you can do that. But so I've heard that that's coming out. I know some people are waiting on that. I also heard, I feel like this was a couple of years ago, that they were working on a new, like a Nations type of game, not the same game, but, something that was going to be kind of an addition or not an expansion, but just like a new game of this, which I'm still would love to see. But anyways, moving on here. So that's going to be my number 8, Nations. So my number 7 is, in my opinion, the best two-player game out there. It's clean, it's efficient, it's elegant, it's perfection. And I know there's some people out there that are going to be like 100% totally agree with you, and there's some people that are going to be like, oh my God, the game just drives me insane. But to me, there's no better two-player game than Twilight Struggle. Obviously it was number one on Board Game Geek for a long time because of how amazing it is as a two-player game. And for me, my favorite part of the game, and this is, when you hear people talk, if they like Twilight Struggle, this is one thing they love. If they hate it, this is what they hate. But I love, if I'm like, say, the Americans, and I've got a hand, and it's full of all Soviet cards, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to get through this round of the struggle that I'm in with this bad hand? And if you're not familiar with Twilight Struggle, anytime you play one of your opponent's cards, they get to always trigger the event on it, with the exception of if you use it for a certain way in a space race thing. But I love that. I just love that feeling of looking at my hand and thinking, how am I going to make it through this? And then hoping my next round, my hand's a lot more, towards me. I love it. I love this game. It's so good. Except for when somebody, you play a card and all of a sudden you start nuclear war and then you lose the game. Hate that part. But no, love it. Absolutely. If you like two-player card games, card-driven games that have, that you're just trying to do different things on the map to try to get up the countries in your favor, and you've never tried this, it is a must. One of the greatest of all time here. So my number seven, Twilight Struggle. So my number 6 is what I would classify as the last pure kind of Euro type of game on my list. So if I was, defining a Euro game where maybe there's, where you're kind of doing an own puzzle, there's still interaction out there, but this one had been my number one for a long time before a certain game came along, and I still love this game. And I still, once again, I will play this at any time. And I had to bust out the old version. I do have the new second edition, but I had to bust out the old one. Look at these awesome cowboys up here. Look at there. I had a sticker on it because I was trying to sell the original because I have the second edition. But anyways, there it is. Great Western Trail. Amazing game. I can't begin to speak of how much I enjoy this game. I love the fact that it is a game where it is really about playing the players. Because you will have games where, maybe somebody's going and building a lot of buildings. And so you have to then be like, okay, am I going to have to build buildings to counterdict that? Or am I going to do this strategy to kind of try to take care of that? Or do I have to get my movement up? Or is there a game where, oh man, he's really going after cows, so am I going to have to switch and try to do this to try to slow them down? It's all about playing the player. You cannot sit down in this game and just say, I am going to do this and be successful. You have to play the players. And I think that is where I've always enjoyed this game. I actually at some point created player powers for this game just because I played it so much. I literally, the score pad in this thing had 100 pages on score pad. They're all used up. I don't have any more. So part of why I ended up buying the second edition. It's that good for me. I love it that much. Obviously, Mr. Alexander Pfister, in my opinion, his absolute perfect game. So Great Western Trail. And for those of you who may sit there and go, well, which version of Great Western Trail? There are no different versions of Great Western Trail, in my opinion. It is the same base type of game. You're still going around in a rondel. You're still collecting cards. You're building buildings. You're using neutral buildings. They're all the same. They just have some different expansion parts to them. And I enjoy them all. They all have interesting aspects to them that I like. But to me, when I say Great Western Trail, it includes all 4 versions of Great Western Trail. There is no difference to me. They're just expansions, and I love them. And This game to me will never leave it would be amazing to me if this game could ever leave my top 10 in 30 years. I can't imagine it leaving my top 10. And so my number 6, Great Western Trail. Oh my goodness, we are ready for the top 5. Woo! Man, I'm excited here. So, pull the table here a little bit closer. So, here we go. My number 5. So, a few seconds ago, I said my perfect 2-player game, right? Twilight Struggle. I don't think that there is a better 2-player game out there. I'm now going to tell you what I think is the perfect 3-player game. And I cannot tell you how much I love this game. And that is Maria. So good. So good. Basically, each of you are going to be playing a faction. Certain ones of you are going to be playing multiple factions. But your whole goal is to try to get your little chits, your little star chits, out onto the board by taking over territories. First one to get all of their chits out on the board, and in the moment that you get your last one out there, you win. Of course, the other players are not only trying to do that, but they're trying to take away yours. And the cool way that you are doing this is you are using a normal type of deck of cards that the numbers, I think they run 2 through 10, and then they'll have some reserve card in there. And they have the 4 different suits. And the board is all hexed off in the different suits. So if I'm in, say, the Hearts hex, and my opponent happens to be across the line and he's in the Spades hex, when we go to battle, we'll have a certain number of armies that we'll have, but then we get to play whatever our suit is to help increase that battle. So sometimes you might be like, ooh, there's a really good place to go over there, but if I go over there, I don't have very many, clubs, so I'm in danger of somebody coming over and being able to take me out. So I might have to take a little bit of a riskier move, or maybe not as good a move, because I want to make sure to stay in Hearts or Spades because I have a lot of those in my hands. And the strategy just so good. I love this so much. There's another game that's a 4-player game that came before this called Friedrich. I enjoy Friedrich very much also. Haven't got to play Friedrich quite as much. It's a 4-player game, and it kind of is a little bit different where it's 1 versus 3 for the base game at least. And I've enjoyed it. But Maria is my go-to. Like I said, when we have 3 people and 3 people who love this game, it's a no-brainer. It's like, hey, let's play a game of Maria. So, all right, that's my number 5, Maria. All right, my number 4, I'm going to give you the certain game that is my number 1 of this series. But once again, this is just, when I'm thinking games in my top 10, I guess sometimes I think the feels of those games. And this particular game has a whole bunch, I think it's like 12 or 13 different volumes of it now. And yes, each one of them is 100% distinct in what its theme is, what the history with it is. Everything about it is unique. But they all give me the same feeling. And that is going to be the GMT series of Coin, which kind of stands for counterinsurgency. And the one that I'm going to show you right here is Fallen Sky, because it is my number 1 coin game. It's my favorite. If you're curious on where the other coin games rank, you can pop over to another video I have where I did the coin game rankings, and you can see exactly how I rank them all. But when it comes to coin games, I will get the same feeling most of the time, if I'm playing Fallen Sky, or if I'm playing, Andean Abyss, or Cuba Libre, Liberty or Death. They all have the similar feel where we're all playing a faction, and all 4 factions are different, and all 4 factions have a different win condition. And it's all a card-based system. Now, some coin games might only play 3 players. There's a couple now that do 2 players, but it's still the same function of how it's played. So when I say coin is my number 4, I mean all the coin games are kind of, for me, lumped together. Yes, Fallen Sky, because its theme, I love Caesar, I love Roman time, I love the fact this is Caesar versus Vercingetorix. It's so thematic and so cool. I really also think that this one is one of the most balanced ones. I always feel like, I feel like three of the factions are able to win quite a bit. Caesar seems to be the one lacking for me. Maybe that's because I play Caesar most of the time, and as much as I love him, I might not be the best at him. But the coin game system is really what my number 4 is. And like I said, I'll throw Fallen Sky up there as my number 1 of my coin games, but absolutely love them. We'll play them at any time. Love, love, love the coin game system. So my number 4, coin game. So my number 3 is I would get, 100%, is going to be my best, 5 to 6 player game out there. And I love this game because it is mean. It is evil, and you can look at somebody and they can be down, and you can kick them in the teeth and make it even worse for them. And sometimes it's worth it, because if you think, oh, they're not doing too well, maybe I'm not going to mess with them, all of a sudden, 2 rounds later, they might be coming back and might come back to win the game. And that is the amazing, awesome Dominant Species. I just can't say enough about this game. It is so good and yet so mean, so interactive. You basically will have a species. You might be birds or reptiles, and you're going to have your cubes out on the board, and you're looking to have control of areas so that you can score these domination cards, these dominate cards. And when you play those, oh, they can be so good for you and not for your opponents, where you can just absolutely just crush them with these different cards. I cannot tell you how much I love this game. I would play this game at any time, any place. It's a longer game. It's going to take you 2.5 to 3.5 hours probably to play a full game, especially if you're playing 5 to 6 players. I don't mind it at 4. I really don't like to go any lower than 4 on it. I know there's some variants where you can play 3 player and everybody has 2 species, which that's too much for my brain. Can't do it. I just can't do 2 species at the same time. But I think at one point I taught my wife and my kid this. And when I kind of taught them that variant, they were like, oh, let's do the 2-player variant where you get 3 species. And I was like, you guys are crazy. And they did it. And I was like, I don't even understand how you're doing that, because that is just too crazy. This goes against everything. I can barely keep track of my one faction when I'm trying to play. But I love it. Certainly there is another version of Dominant Species. It's called Dominant Species Marine. That's just a 2 to 4 player game. I find that one to be a little bit better at 2 or 3 because, it's a smaller player count. I do feel like a lot of it is going to be very similar to Dominant Species. There's some differences in it where it is a little bit more, I shouldn't even say a little bit more, it's a lot more random. The cards come up, they're not as mean, I'll tell you that much, and it kind of can depend on when certain things happen, when it comes into an extinction or a survival, and that part I wish was not necessarily there because I don't like the randomness of it. I do really like the part in Dominant Species Marine where when you place a pawn, you then have to kind of go down the track and place your pawns further down. So you can't just necessarily take a really good action to start with and then go back and do other things. You have to kind of go down with your pawns if you want to do that, or you got to spend a turn just passing. And I really like that part about Dominant Species. I know sometimes people will say, oh, I think Dominant Species Marine is just a pile of garbage. I don't agree with that. I think there is some really good stuff in Dominant Species Marine. If you had to ask me which one am I keeping, there's no question I'm keeping regular Dominant Species. Not even a question. However, I do think there's some really great things about Dominant Species Marine. I just wish there wasn't the randomness with the cards, and I wish the cards were a little bit more meaner like they were in the original Dominant Species. But anyways, that's my number 3, Dominant Species. Okay, guys, we're to the final 2. And both of these games are just unbelievably spectacular for me. One of them had been my number 1, my number 2 that's about to come up, had been my number 1 for years now. But this year, I couldn't do it because there's a game that just right now has my heart, and I just want to play it all the time. But we're going to get to that in a second. Let's get to number 2 right now. I mean, hey, it has an entire con for it right here. and that is the great Age of Steam. Age of Steam is a spectacular game. It is a great, it has great auctions, it has great decisions, it has great interactivity, and of course, probably the biggest thing that makes Age of Steam so good is it has so many different maps. I'm assuming at this point there's well over 200 maps that are out there, including, I currently have a couple of different maps. One that's on Board Game Geek, it's called Manhattan 1929, and I got another one in the works that's called Spades. It's kind of like a trick-taking map, and that's what I love about Age of Steam is all the different maps and the different ways you can play it. Some maps like go so crazy, like I feel like, oh my goodness, I don't even want to play an Age of Steam anymore. And some of them have very little minor changes, but make the game so, like, oh wow, I can't believe this little thing did this much to change the game and make it feel that, different, yet still Age of Steam. It's amazing. It is spectacular. The only negative on it is you can't play it 2-player. I know there's 2-player maps. I've never played a 2-player map that I thought is, oh my god, amazing. I've played a couple of them that are good, but I still have never found one that I think is amazing. I've tried working on a 2-player map. It just kind of kept failing every time I tried to. But you're talking, there's 3-player maps that are outstanding, and then you get into 4. I think probably 4 and 5 are my favorite player counts for this game. But, I've played 8-player games of Double Base USA with this huge map and had just a fantastic time with it. I absolutely love this game. Age of Steam, my number 2. So I can't believe that that's my number 2 because I love that game so much. But this game right now is just the most spectacular game I've ever played. The way that you have to play it and how you have to think about what you're doing is so interesting to me that every time I play it, it's a whole different way I feel like I'm playing on trying to figure out what to do. And quite honestly, as most games, and I'm not saying games that, victory points are the best way to win, but sometimes it's good to have a game where it's not like hey, victory points is how you win. And in this game, victory points don't matter because there are no victory points. You're just simply trying to complete one of the different goals or win conditions in the game, but you have to activate those win conditions before you can even use them. And this is the amazing Pax Renaissance. So this is the second edition big box version of it. I know the first edition was just like some cards. It really doesn't matter. This one might be a little bit easier if you're starting to learn the game because it kind of lays out where everything goes, where in the with the cards you're just kind of laying them out on the table. But it's spectacular. It is 100% just the most amazing game I've ever played. That's why it's my number 1. The strategy in it of, okay, my opponent is going for this. I'm trying to do this. How am I going to stop them? How are they going to try to stop me? How am I going to try to, counterdict what they're trying to do to stop me? Oh, what's my backup plan? How's this going to work? Phenomenal. Absolutely love this game. I will tell you this, if you sit down and just try to learn this game by yourself, it's rough, it's tough. You've got to be really good at rule books if you want to do that. Hopefully somebody can teach you. I know they just released this on Board Game Arena in an alpha setting, so it's still being kind of the bugs and stuff being worked out on it. I've gotten to play a game of it. I'm not a big online game player, but I'm going to make an exception for this. And it's phenomenally good. Obviously, really helps out on if trying to figure out rules because you can try different things. It will only let you do what you can actually do, which is great. So that's a good way to learn it, I should say. Player count wise, it is amazing at 2, superbly amazing at 3. It gets a little chaotic at 4 because it's really hard to still win with the win conditions at 4. But I still don't mind it. I still find it very interesting on what you're doing. I would play this anytime, anywhere, anyhow. Doesn't matter. Number 1 right here. Yeah, I mean, good old Phil and Matt Eklund were the designers of this game, and I just can't say enough about it. My number one of all time, Pax Renaissance. Woo! We did it! We've gotten through 101 board games of all time. I'm so curious. Please, in the comments, let me know. Tell me, hey, how many of these are in your top 10? Is there any in the top 10 that you're like, wow, I just don't understand? How do you have Heaven and Hail in your top 10? Let me know. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to chat. If you do like my top 10 and you're like, wow, I really think this is, this kind of the same vibe, and you've never checked out my podcast, I do it with a couple of other gentlemen, Chad and Richie. It's called Punchboard Paradise. And come check us out. We've been doing episodes for like 5 years now, so there's a lot of episodes out there, but come check us out. We would love to have you listen. But that's it. I'm done. I'm finished. And I really appreciate it if you've gone through this whole journey with me. And next year, I'll come back out. We'll see. I wonder what will change. We don't know. But for now, 2024, I'm done.